What is up, and welcome back to another episode of Blood and Beer. I'm your host, Matt, and today we're going to be talking all things not UFC. So it's going to be PFL, GFL, and BKFC today. A lot of changes in the PFL. GFL, they've got their draft coming up, and then BKFC, they have Knucklemania V coming up, and we're going to preview that as well. We're going to kick things off, though, with the PFL. Don Davis did a town hall, and they announced a lot of changes happening to the whole organization. They're changing their entire layout, their entire format. So first thing, Bellator, it was working side by side with PFL. Bellator is now dead. It's being absorbed by PFL. Next, they're eliminating the season concept. So season is dead. Now they're switching over to a Grand Prix style. And with this Grand Prix style, instead of having 16 or 32 guys competing, it's going to be 8 people in each Grand Prix. They're going to do it, I think, for 8 divisions as well. Instead of $1 million, it's $500,000 on top of your purse, whereas before the $1 million was just $1 million flat pay, nothing else. Now it's going to be whatever your purse was plus that $500,000. They're now going to be allowing elbows in the PFL. So that was a big thing that they didn't allow before because of the damage that it causes. The cuts, the scratches, the bruising, everything. They didn't allow elbows so that way people didn't get doctor suspensions so they could fight a little more often. That's going to be allowed now. And with Bellator being dead, now they're going to have a PFL championship, and the PFL champion will be separate from the PFL Grand Prix winner or the PFL tournament winner. So you're going to have someone whoever wins it this year, for example, will be the 2025 tournament champion, and they'll always be the 2025 tournament champion. But they could be side by side with the lightweight champion at that time, whoever has the belt, because they'll be doing super fights in the champion series still. They're just not going to be doing Bellator, and it's not going to be as confusing to watch. It's going to look a lot more like how one championship did when they did theirs, or how Bellator did, where you had the Grand Prix champion, and then you had the Bellator champion, or you had the one champion, like Demetrius Johnson for a while at flyweight. He was the Grand Prix champion, but he wasn't the champion of their weight class, and that's how PFL is going to be looking. So it's not going to be 5 different things happening. There's not going to be the super fights, and then the champion series, and then the season, and then the European season. They're still going to have their European tournaments and everything like that, their Africa, their Middle East tournaments, but they're just also going to be in this Grand Prix format instead of the season style. So it's going to be a lot more easy to watch. It's such a confusing product right now as it is. So hopefully, I hope I'm doing it justice by speaking what changes are going to be happening. Don Davis did a really good job in his town hall, the second one that he did with MMA fighting. So we're gonna see the changes that they make, because they looked like they were dead in the rights, or dead in the sights, whatever the phrase is. They looked like they were done for after this past year. It was a really bad year for PFL. So hopefully they can bounce back, because I love seeing players in the game. And then they've got a championship fight this weekend. It's for the Bellator belt, because Don Davis, while he said we're not going to be having people, we're not going to be awarding people the belt or things like that, you can still defend your belt. So Usman Nurmagomedov, he was the Bellator champion, and he's going to be taking on Paul Hughes. I think it's Paul Big News Hughes is his nickname. Irish fighter. He got signed to PFL when the Bellator PFL acquisition happened, and he was big prospect. UFC wanted him, but he wanted a bigger contract. PFL was willing to give that to him. He's had a couple fights in Bellator. He beat AJ McKee in his last time out, so he's going to be taking on Usman Nurmagomedov. There's so many of them. Brother of Umar, who just took on Merab Dvalishvili. And Usman, this dude is an absolute nightmare. He's looked invincible over in Bellator. He outstrikes everybody. If you want to strike with him, he'll let you, and then he'll take you down, and he'll outstrike you for 25 minutes. The guy's just so well-rounded, super athletic. When he comes to the UFC, he's just waiting for Islam to either vacate that division or retire, because he'll be the next champion. He's the next step in this long line of dominant Dagestani wrestlers. So I don't see Paul Hughes being a big problem for him. Paul Hughes has power. He's always coming forward, but just the new wave of Dagestani fighters, before they were just wrestlers and you might get lucky and knock them out if you can keep it on the feet. Now, if you keep it on the feet, they can outstrike you and they can out-wrestle you. So it's just, he's a nightmare matchup. He's going to defend this belt, and that's probably going to be it. They'll probably award him the PFL championship just because he's de facto the best that they have on the roster at 155. And then another fight they have on that card is going to be Vadim Nemkov. He's taking on Tim Johnson, former light heavyweight champion Vadim Nemkov. This is the last fight on his PFL contract. He said he's not opposed to re-signing if these changes that they said they're making are going to be going into effect. But he has been really frustrated, like other fighters we've heard, like Patchy Mix, like Corey Anderson, like Patricio Pitbull. All these guys, they're frustrated with the lack of fights they're getting. So he's open to re-signing a new contract. He just wants to get the fights that he's signed to. He was supposed to get 4 fights over 2 years, and he only got, this will be his second fight in the past 2 years. Just, he's disappointed. They all are. They have these big contracts they had just signed, and it's not being fulfilled. And they're not choosing not to fight. They're not turning down any fighters. They're just like, I want my purse, and PFL isn't forking it up because they don't really have, they just didn't have the setup. They didn't have anywhere in their yearly calendar to put these guys. That was a really bad situation. But hopefully with these new changes, we've got a lot more clarity as to what's going to be coming down the pipes for PFL. I think it's going to be a good thing. And now we're moving on to GFL. Who the hell knows how this is going to be? We have one MMA season, pass away, die, and float down the river, and another one comes washing ashore. We have GFL, who slightly different than PFL. It's going to be a season format, but instead of one person in the season, it's team-based. Their concept is, the easiest thing for people to get behind in sports is a team. So if we have teams of MMA fighters fighting other teams, people will get behind that. They'll get behind their city. Not a terrible concept, but with MMA, it's not the same because you're having so many different events carry it. It's going to be convoluted. It's going to be ugly, messy, murky. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think the season format works. It's too confusing for people that aren't following it just religiously. And the people that they've signed to fight, Darren Owens, the CEO, president, he said that they plan on developing fighters from within, but they understand they got to get these big splash names, these, the Luke Rockholds, the Frank Mears, the Vanderlei Silvas, those names. We got to sign them just to get some notoriety and some eyes on us, but we want to develop our own talent. That's great. They have their draft this Friday. We're going to get a lot better idea of what's going to be going on because they have 420 people signed that could be drafted. Only 120 people get drafted to the 6 teams. 20 people per team, 2 people per weight class, 10 weight classes. So that's how it's going to be. And all these old farts that they got signed, they got Frank Mir signed, they got Vanderlei, who Vanderlei can't fight because he said he thinks he has CTE. They didn't know about that, so they made him a team manager instead. But all these old guys they've got signed that could fight, I don't want to see them against a guy like Robelas de Spain, who's also signed to them, who would just absolutely sleep, and Andrei Arlovsky, or absolutely just shadow around Frank Mir because they're so much older and he's super strong. That's the matchups we don't want to see. But with that being said, Darren Owens in his town hall with MMA Fighting, he went out and said that we're not going to let those kinds of fights happen. We want to have veterans fighting veterans. And with the GFL owning all 6 teams, we can trade people to teams that we want so that way we have the matchups that we're looking for. Which, what the fuck is the point of the season if we're doing that? What is the point of the season if you're like, yeah, we have a season, we have teams, but we're still going to trade people around, move them as needed so that way we get the matchups we want. So, if you have teams, you have teams. It's set in place. The Chiefs aren't like, oh yeah, we're going to trade Patrick Mahomes to the Ravens this week so that way the Ravens can, you can see Patrick Mahomes versus Josh Allen every week. It's just, you don't do that. You can't manipulate the teams to get the outcomes you want, and that's why PFL's season format didn't work. You can't manipulate the league to get the outcomes you want. With the teams, you can't manipulate the teams to get the matchups you want, or else they're not teams. Who's going to be able to? You just want us to blindly follow this logo, even though maybe I'm a diehard Luke Rockhold fan, but you trade him away right before he's supposed to fight for us, so that way he can go fight some other guy. it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's going to leave a bad taste in anybody's mouth that does get behind it. But I don't think people are going to be diehard fans of these teams. I think this is. I want to stay optimistic. I like the idea of the fights, but it seems dead. Like this seems dead. Like dead on arrival. It's not gonna work because first you got to get people to follow your promotion, which the media is. You're getting tons of attention. I'm talking about it right now. But then you got to get people to invest in your teams. And either if you got the diehards, we're watching, but we're like, man, I don't want to see Frank Mir fight, or I don't want to see, Tyron Woodley get knocked out again or look terrible. And then we also got to find a team that we're like, all right, this is who we're invested in. This is my team that I'm just rooting for all the time. One event a month. I get it's a concept season this time. It's not off to a good start. It's like I said, it's muddy, it's convoluted. You don't know what the fuck's going on with it. I shouldn't be cussing. I'm trying to lay off of that. But one good thing about it, in the booth, it looks like they're going to have Brennan Schaub and Mike Goldberg, Goldberg. Sorry, I was thinking between Greenberg and Goldberg, but they're going to be in the booth. I love his commentary. Schaub, he's a funny guy. People will shit on him, so people might tune in just to hate on Schaub. But I don't think this is going to turn out well. I'm excited to see how the draft turns out, and in February they're going to announce their entire season and all their dates and everything. But I'm not optimistic. I want to be optimistic. I want this to work. It's just I don't think it's going to. And that's going to lead us to another promotion that is doing things right. BKFC, and this is the only promotion outside of the UFC that seems like they are doing things right all the time, And the reason it is doing things right is because it's something different than the UFC. And they're not trying to compete with the UFC. They understand they're in the same world. They're just in a different part of the city. I don't know. They're in the same state, different part of the city. They know they're there, but they're not going to mention them. They're not going to try to compete with them, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're killing it. They play off entertainment, pace. One fight's over, the next fight's coming to the ring. I mean, it's just super entertaining stuff. All violence the whole time. 2-minute rounds. I love it. And they got Knucklemania V this weekend, headlined by Eddie Alvarez, former UFC champ. He's taking on Jeremy Low Heathen Stevens, UFC vet, and then Ben Rothwell, another UFC vet. He's going to be challenging Mick Terrell for the BKFC Heavyweight Championship. And then we got Taylor Starling versus Beth Rawlings. Tons of other fights on the card. It's going to be happening this Saturday on DAZN. There's not a lot to say about BKFC. It's just violent. It's fun. You have a couple beers, you watch it. It's entertaining as shit. You're like, wow, that dude's cut up. But it's fun. It's bloody. It's violent. We love the blood sport here. And then I'll go ahead and leave you with this. If you're looking for something to watch during the week, killing time, nothing to do, Vice has Dark Side of the Cage out now. They've done a few stories already. They got one on the late Evan Tanner, former UFC light heavyweight champion who went on a voyage into the desert and never came back. He just passed away out there. So that's going to be coming out this week. They've already done a story on Diego Sanchez and another one on Kimbo Slice. So those are good watches. Dark Side of the Ring, Dark Side of the 90s, all that. They're all good watches. So go ahead and check that out. But that's what's going on outside of the UFC with GFL, PFL. Thought we'd get into all of that. BKFC on a UFC down week. They're coming back with Israel Adesanya versus Nasruddin Imavov in Saudi Arabia. I think that's February 1st. We'll have a show for that card next week. And then it's followed up by the pay-per-view UFC 312 Strickland versus Duplessis. So I'm Matt with Blood and Beer. Thank you for tuning in. I'm out of breath after that little ramble.